Welcome to the Fundamentals of Hatha Yoga. In this presentation, we'll be exploring how to approach key postures in a way that optimizes their benefits. In part one, we'll look at the principles that underlie a safe, efficient, and effective practice. And in part two, we'll apply those principles to a set of postures you can practice along with or memorize for your home practice. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. What is yoga? So there are many forms of yoga. You could go from just ritual action. You could talk about meditation, pure meditation. You could also think about yoga as being a devotional practice. But for our purposes, we'll be looking at asana, or the postural practice of Hatha Yoga. And in that case, we want to look specifically at how the body works, how to optimize the poses, and how to apply alignment to the poses to get the most out of them. So yoga differentiates itself in particular ways from other forms of exercise. If you think about tennis or swimming or jogging, these are all exercises where we're moving the periphery of the body pretty dynamically, and that peripheral movement feeds into the core of the body and makes us stronger. It also provides cardiovascular benefits. But a yoga pose is different. What we do with yoga poses is we actually stabilize the periphery of the body. We don't let the hands and the feet move so that we can feed into the core lines of the body, and from those anchors to the ground, stimulate the core lines and make them stronger and more flexible. So there's different kinds of yoga poses. Of course, we have forward bends, we've got back bends, we have side leans, twists, inversions, restoratives. So we can talk about yoga poses in different categories. You could have different kinds of forward bends, different versions of forward bends, different orientations to gravity for forward bends. You could have back bends that have those same differentiations as well. So what would we like to design in our yoga practice so that we can get the most out of the yoga poses? We'd want to move the spine in every direction that it can move, and we want to be able to stimulate all parts of the body. So then we would start to choose poses based on their categories and based on their function and the benefits to the body. So within these categories, of course, there are different levels of difficulty in poses. There are poses that are just plain hard work. If you're doing a plank or a low plank, it requires a lot of muscular integration in the body. And there's also poses that are categorized as difficult because they're complex. And you'll see some of these show up in our practice today. So you've got a pose like Warrior One that has a different foot placement for the back and front foot. There's a spinal twist, there's a reaching up of the arm. So there's many things going on in some of the complex poses, and that's what makes them difficult rather than them being difficult just muscularly. So how do these poses affect the body? In what way are they actually good for us? As I mentioned, we've got different categories of poses, but we also can think about how do we want to approach our practice? Do we want to approach our practice in a way that is gymnastic and performance-oriented, or do we want to approach it in a way that has long-term benefits for the body, strength, flexibility, balance, proprioception, the ability to feel within the body as well, interoception? So these are all different qualities that, to me, require a little bit more time and more mindful practice to do. So for this practice today, we won't be moving quickly through the poses, we'll be moving mindfully through the poses so that we can understand how they work. So every pose, as you noticed, I'm sure you've seen, has a different kind of duration. So you've got a pose that could have a duration for maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute, but you won't see many yoga poses going much beyond that. And there's reasons for that. If you're in a strong pose or a standing pose and the body is working, you're engaging your muscles, there's only so long you can keep the musculature of the body engaged before it starts to get tired, before that particular muscle group gets tired. So say you're in a standing pose using your legs very strongly. After 30 seconds or maybe a minute at the most, the legs will start to become tired, and at that point it's time to move to another pose or a different set of muscles so that you can work them so the legs can rebuild their ability to engage again. So that leads into posture duration. And for this practice, we'll be looking at posture durations between 35 and 45 seconds long. Of course, underlying all of the postures and everything that we do in our lives is the breath. We can recognize it or we can be unconscious of it. In yoga practice, we want to be conscious of the breath and be able to move with the breath. In a sense, the breath is guiding the movement. So if I inhale and reach my arms up, I want my inhale to precede the movement of the body so that I'm flowing with the breath rather than abrupt practice of moving and then just kind of breathing in a rather haphazard manner. But there's more to it than that. So the breath not only is guiding the movement, the breath is regulating our nervous system. So as I inhale, and I take a deep inhale, my chest fills, my back actually bends a little bit. It goes into a slight back bend or extension. And as I exhale, the opposite happens. There's a slight flexion of the spine. So even with breathing, there is this undulation happening in the spine due to the movement of the breath. So we can capitalize that within the yoga practice by noticing it and breathing to match some of those movements. So if I sit and breathe, and I'm breathing on the inhale and expanding, not only is the body lifting and opening, but the nervous system is actually moving into a more aware or awake state. And as I exhale, the opposite is happening. The body is moving and the nervous system is moving into a more restorative or relaxed state. So you'll notice if you're going to the airport to meet a friend and you see them, there's usually this sort of exuberant lift that's associated with our inhale when we're excited. And when we relax, we go back home. After a long day, you sit down and you sigh. There's a relaxing quality to that exhale. So the inhale and the exhale patterns are always governing the movement. And depending on the postures, of course, we'll be breathing, inhaling and exhaling through all the postures. But some postures we may want to emphasize an exhale for relaxation purposes. All right, so let's look a little bit more particularly at how to actually set the foundation of a yoga pose. So the foundation is any part that's touching the floor. When you're doing standing poses, that would be your feet. And then in poses like downward dog and some other poses of that sort, your hands might also be on the floor as well. I talked earlier about the periphery of the body in regular exercise moving quite a bit. And in Hatha yoga, the periphery of the body is stabilized so that we can feed into the core. So if you think about this in a very simple way, as a kind of a map to remember, if you tighten up the loose parts, that's the periphery of the body, you can loosen up the tight parts. So tighten up the loose parts to loosen up the tight parts. So let's take a look at that when it comes to the feet. So if I set my feet roughly hips distance apart, just so that I'm able to look at them independently, the feet could be collapsed inward. You can see how the ankles move in like that. Many people have weak arches in their feet because of shoes and all kinds of just lack of exercise for the feet, or they could actually be rolled out the other way as well. And this would affect the knees, the position of the knees, and then the hips. So what I'd like to do is, again, tighten up the loose parts. I want to set the foundation of my feet so it's nice and strong. And in this case, I'll think about the feet as having four corners. The big toe mound, the inner heel of my feet, the little toe mound, and the outer heel. So the way I'll set the foundation is just by lifting my heels off the ground and perching or kind of balancing on my big toe mounds with the toes lifted. That gives me the first point of contact. Keeping that point strong, I'm going to stretch back and place the inner heel down to the ground. So now I've developed a stronger arch in my foot. From the inner heel, I'm going to stretch out across the foot to the little toe side and plant the little toe side of the foot down. That creates an arch here, a transverse arch. And then from the little toe side, I'll stretch all the way out to the outer edges of the feet. So now my feet are set in this position, and I don't want them to move if I move. So if I were to stand up from here and then say lean over to the right, or lean over to the left, I wouldn't want my feet to go with me, because if that happens, I'm not stimulating the rest of the body. I want to plant the feet and then lean or twist without actually moving them. In that way, the periphery of the body stays nice and strong so that the stimulus can feed into the core lines of the body. Okay, the foundation of the hands. So in a very similar way to the feet, the hands can become weak or unglued from the ground. And if that happens, some negative things can happen to the poses. So if my hand comes off the ground like that, and you see the index finger mound lift, you can see how the wrist is deformed. The two bones in my lower arm, I'm only bearing weight really down on the outside bone. And I don't have the same structure and strength in the arms to protect and stimulate the body. So I want to be able to create a strong foundation in the hands for any pose that I have my hands on the ground. And very much like the feet, I've got the index finger mound, the thumb mound, the little finger mound, and the outer heel of the hand. So once I've set those 4 points, I'm almost creating a dome-like structure in the palm of the hand. As you can see, as I engage my hand like that, the muscles around the edge of the hand fire up, and that dome structure in nature is a very strong structure. So keep those 4 corners strong, and then if I just lean back and move into a different shape, no matter where I go with my body, the hands don't move. They stay nice and strong so that I can again tighten up the loose parts of the body. In this case, it would be the hands, so that I can loosen up the tight parts of the body, which in this case would be the shoulders primarily. All right, so next let's look at muscular engagement. So we've talked about the foundation and setting the foundation strong, which requires some muscular effort, but now we're going to look at a generalized integration through the rest of the body. So if I set my foundation through the feet, as we talked about earlier, my legs are relatively strong, but I could still be hanging out in my joints, just pushing my knees back and having disengaged legs rather than strong legs. So what I want to do is just bend my knees. And as I do that, I'm forced to use the strength of my body to hold myself up. I can't just lean into the back of my knees. So I know my legs are going to be a little stronger. Keeping the legs engaged, that's the trick. Then I just slowly stretch the legs straight. But I continue to engage the muscles while I elongate the legs. So that I have the lower body strong now. Same thing in the upper body. I could bring my arms out to a T, and they could be there but not particularly strong. If I engage the muscles of the biceps first, and then stretch the arms out with the bicep muscles engaged and stretch through the fingers, now I have an engagement in my arms as well as an elongation pattern. And then I can bring my hands down to the sides. So now I'm in the shape of Tadasana, or mountain pose. And the first movement into sun salutation would be reaching the arms up. So if you watch my lower back, if I wasn't aware of what could happen here, as I reach my arms up and I get to the limits of where my flexibility would allow me to do, I might actually lean forwards in an attempt to try to bring my arms higher up, what appears to be a bigger stretch to me, but I'm just moving my upper body into a different position by leaning into the pose and lifting my spine like that. So that isn't really a stretch to the shoulders. If I want to stimulate the shoulders, I keep the foundation strong, keep the muscles engaged, and when I reach the limit of my flexibility, I just draw the ribs in, make sure that my low back doesn't bend, and then I see what I can do. I challenge my range of motion, and in this way, I'm actually stimulating the shoulders and getting stronger and more flexible rather than just moving into the pose in a less mindful way. Okay, so what's actually going on in a yoga pose physiologically when we move or when we stretch? So we have different components of the body. We have bones, of course. We've got connective tissue, which is a very strong, dense type of tissue in the body. And we also have the musculature, and of course the skin, and all the organs and blood supply and things like that. But in terms of stimulus to the body, there's the bones, the connective tissue, and the muscles. So when we reach up or stretch in a yoga pose, it isn't just one muscle stretching, it's actually a whole net of musculature and what's called myofascia, which is being stimulated. So rather than thinking about the body as having individual muscles that are stimulated in yoga, it's probably more helpful to think about regions of the body, in the front of the body or the shoulder or the back of the body, in terms of an entire area being stimulated than one specific muscle. And you'll notice as well when you practice, if you look around at other people practicing, that you don't look quite the same as they do, or they don't look quite the same as you do in the yoga poses. And the reason for that is as different as the bones in our body. We have the same number of bones, but our bone shapes are different. The length of bone is different, obviously. There are taller and shorter people. And even the construction of the bone, the density can be different. So all of this plays into what the yoga postures look like on the outside. If you look at somebody in a very deep back bend, they may have a spine that's constructed that allows them to bend that much. And then you might find in your own pose that you eventually get blocked by going any deeper, no matter how stretched out you are, and that's because of the bones in your body, the different shapes of bones in the body. So this is just to say that there's different types of body, different types of bones, and your practice should include your own particularities. So within most yoga practices, sometimes near the end, you'll see a set of postures called inversions or upside down postures. And you could ask, what are the benefit of these poses? And there has been some studies done on them, and it's quite interesting. When we put the body upside down, we're normally in a right side up position. So when you bring the legs up higher than the heart, there is a lymphatic drainage. And the lymph is essentially recirculated blood plasma. As it comes down from the lower body via gravity in an inversion, it's assisted because of the gravitational pull to go back towards the lymph nodes in the upper body. So it's actually a cleansing and detoxifying system that is being encouraged through the inversions. Another quality that inversions can help encourage is a lowering of blood pressure in the lower body. So as we have our legs up above our heads in an inversion like headstand or shoulder stand, not only is the lymphatic system activated and draining, but the blood pressure is lowering and slightly increasing in the torso. And as this slight increase happens, the set of systems within the body called baroreceptors notices the slight increase in blood pressure in the chest cavity, and therefore lowers the heart rate. So inversions are not only good for the lymphatic system, but they're also a nice introduction or entry into restorative yoga postures. So there's a couple of great benefits for doing those kinds of poses near the end of your practice before you're ready for Shavasana. All right, so what drives our human movement? So one school of thought is that we just put one leg forward and then the next, kind of saving ourselves from falling, and it's actually the legs that are driving the movement. That's not a particularly graceful way of moving, and it also doesn't line up with the way that we've evolved. If you look at a fish has a naturally curving spine. It actually drives its movement through the water by its spine. And as we've evolved, we have slowly grown an appendicular skeleton, arms and legs, that allow us to use the periphery of our body for tools and all kinds of things. But the movement is still being driven by the spine, and therefore we would want the spine to be healthy. So if I was to move with the strength and the grace of the spine, then I would use the spine, as we do normally, just to drive my legs forward. And the legs moving are actually a secondary aspect of what's going on here rather than the first thing that happens. So this concept is called the Spinal Engine. In order to maintain healthy movement and graceful movement, we would like a healthy spine, which means we want to be able to stimulate it in every direction that it can move, forwards, backwards, twisting, side bending, and everything else you can think of. So you notice as Natalie is moving that not only is her spine driving her lower body, her legs, but her arms are actually moving in opposition to her legs as well. So this is another indication that the spine is actually the originator of movement rather than the legs. All right, so we just talked about the curves of the spine, the spinal engine. So how and where do these curves show up in the body? So of course we have a spine, and we could talk about having three regions to the spine. We have the neck, or the cervical spine. We've got the thoracic spine, or the rib cage area, and then the lumbar, which is the low back. And each one of these regions of the body works slightly differently. The lumbar spine is responsible for helping us forward and back bend. A lot of the movement comes from there. The thoracic spine is more responsible for rotation, and the neck has a lot of flexibility in every direction, but not as much stability. So if you had somebody, or even yourself, let's say you had a flattened low back, and maybe Natalie, if you could show them what that would look like. So you see if she's drawing down her tailbone, and you'll see this sometimes with people that have a very, very flat low back. This would prohibit them from moving gracefully and could even create compression in the low back. So what we would want to do in our poses is help to encourage more lumbar curve. So to do that, Natalie could just bend her knees, place her hands to the top of her knees, press her buttocks back a little bit, and she's starting to increase the curvature in her low back now just by the position of her body. And there are yoga poses, of course, that encourage this as well. And if she wanted to maintain that when she stands up tall, she just remembers how that feels in her low back and then comes all the way up to a standing position. And help to encourage a natural curve in the low back. All right, so in a moment, Natalie will be moving into downward facing dog, which is kind of the quintessential all-purpose pose, one of my favorites. Before we get there, let's take a look again at the curves of the spine. Now, right now, she's On hands and knees, she's got support for her shoulders via her arms. She's got support for her hips via her knees. Her thigh bones fit into the hip socket very well in this position. When she moves into downward facing dog, that geometry will change a little bit. But let's explore and look at what happens with flexion and extension in the spine first. So if Natalie starts to do cat-cow poses, you can go ahead and just move, Natalie. You can see how the spine will move into what's called flexion. And there's some strength required to do that in the upper back, as you can see, and the lower back kind of flattens out. And then she goes into extension, the opposite pose. She's increasing back bend, using different groups of muscles to do that. And then she's undulating back and forth between these poses. So if she couples this with her breath, whether she wants to inhale as she inflates or exhale, it's kind of up to her. And she goes back and forth. Now she's moving with the breath. She's moving the spine. She's moving into the practice of yoga by doing this. And then from there, we'll get into downward facing dog. So Natalie can now lift her knees up and move back into an upside down V. So different traditions in the yoga practices have different lengths of pose, different ways of doing it. For our purposes, what I'd like to have Natalie doing is have her pose long enough so that you can actually stretch your spine effectively. So let's have her come to high plank. Now, if you want to come up to the top of the push-up, and then just walk your feet back till your toes are under your heels. So in this position, she's got her toes underneath her heels, her shoulders on top of her hands, and this will be our template for moving back into downward dog from to provide optimal stretch for the spine. So then she can just move her hips back into the upside down V again, and she's in downward facing dog. Now, if you look at the upper body, you can see that she has a nice natural curve in her spine. She's supporting her shoulders with her hands, and her feet are well placed. So, as I mentioned earlier, tightening up the loose parts of the body, which would be the foundation, making them nice and strong so that you can feed in to the core lines of the body, the hips and the shoulders, to begin to stretch and strengthen those areas. Thanks, Natalie. That's great. Come on down. All right, so now we'll begin our posture sequence. So you can take a comfortable seat. This will be about a 45-minute long sequence. And just close your eyes. Get comfortable. You can lean forward and back a few times till you find what feels like the center of your pose in those directions. And then you might want to lean left and right a couple times, again, just to feel what feels like balanced at the center point of those directions. And once you find that place, take a nice deep inhale, and you may want to sigh out your first exhale to allow that grounding quality of the exhale to establish the foundation in your seat. And once you're there with your eyes closed, just gradually begin to breathe more voluntarily here. You can lift the upper palate of the mouth, so you're creating the sound of water on rocks or wind through the trees as you breathe. It's called the Ujjayi breath. And we'll be moving with this breath through the entire practice until Shavasana. So that'll be consistent through the whole thing. Begin to feel the temperature of the air on your skin, the weight through the sit bones, so you're aware of your whole body, the air outside you as well as the breath inside you. And before we begin practice, you may want to make a short invocation or a gesture of gratitude by bringing your palms together. Rest your thumbs to your heart. And I'll start us with one Om. Nice deep inhale. And from there, you can place your hands to your knees. Lift your gaze and open your eyes. And our first pose will be child's pose. So come on to hands and knees to establish the length for this pose. You want to walk the knees back till they're roughly under your hips, your palms under your shoulders, fingers spread nice and wide, about shoulder distance apart. And from there, just keep your arms straight and strong and move back towards child's pose. Move your hips back towards your heels, keeping your arms straight as you go back. And you may need to adjust the length of your stance slightly. Once you get there, just take a few breaths. And as we move through this practice, every pose we do will be encouraging muscular engagement in certain parts of the body that will be required for the next pose. So it's a progressive way of moving through these poses. Keep the hands nice and firm and planted. And as you do, see if you can lift or energize the arms a little bit so they become a little bit stronger here, as if you were doing downward facing dog. Hands firm, arms firm, and elongate through the sides of the body. Take one more breath. And then with your arms still straight and strong, on your inhale, come all the way back up again to hands and knees. And then walk your knees back about 6 inches to 1 foot in preparation for the next pose, which is puppy pose. As you slide back this time, still keep your arms and hands strong, but you want to end up with your hips over your knees rather than all the way back as you were before. So slide back as much as you can. You may need to walk the knees back even further to do that, or hands forward to get into the position of puppy pose. So a little bit more weight bearing in the upper body here, more of a preparation for downward facing dog. So keep the hands firm, the shoulders strong, and the breath long. Take one more deep breath there in puppy pose. And again, as you inhale, come all the way back up again towards hands and knees position. And we'll do one pose before downward dog. You can walk your fingers back and come into a tuck of the toes, so you're sitting on your heels. And walk your fingers back behind you to support your upper body. Press down through your fingertips, lift your chest, and curl back and gaze up with a strong neck for a back bend stretch. And here, just maintain length through the sides of the body as you draw your shoulders back and you bring your gaze up. Firm up the feet so that you can stretch the ankles. One more breath there. And then just lean forward and come back again to hands and knees, and then we'll prepare for downward facing dog. So walk your hands up close to the front of your mat. You can step one leg back to set the foundation length for plank, and then the next leg, and then both legs, and then stretch back into downward facing dog. So here we'll apply the foundation for the hands and the feet. So keep the four corners of your feet strong. Keep the four corners of your hands strong. Stabilize the lower legs and the arms. And use those foundation points to help elongate and stretch the spine as you breathe deeply into the pose. Take 2 more breaths there. And on your next inhale, you can walk forward to the front of the mat. Come all the way up. And as you exhale, fold into standing forward fold. And just take a few moments here in your standing forward fold to reset the foundation in your feet. Make the four corners of the feet strong. Firm up the shins. And with the lower body strong, place your hands to your hips. And on an inhale, come all the way up to standing in preparation for sun salutations. All right, so the next movement will be into sun salutations, and we'll do a modification first. So make your feet strong, take a nice deep breath, ground down through your lower body. And as you inhale, reach your arms up and over your head. And then as you exhale, you can just bring your hands back down to your sides for the first one, just to guide the breath with the movement. On your next inhale, with legs strong, reach up again, stretch the arms overhead. And as you exhale, fold forward and touch the ground. As you inhale, gaze forward and place your palms down and step back into downward facing dog. Take a full breath here to set the length of your foundation and the strength of your hands and feet. On your next inhale, come to the top of a push-up, high plank. And for our first one, we'll just come down to the knees and then bend the elbows and lower all the way down to the floor, stretching the arms forward and laying the toes down on the floor. Good, so you can bring the palms down to the floor, press down all the way down to the floor, and then bring the gaze forward and strengthen the shoulders. So this is creating strength in the upper back in preparation for the poses to come. On your next breath, bring the hands alongside you, palms facing towards the body. And as you inhale again, lift the shoulders up and away from the floor. Bring the gaze forward. And then from there, you can bend the elbows, interlace your fingers behind your back, Lift the shoulders first and then stretch the arms second to stretch and open the body. And finally, release the fingers, bring the palms under your elbows, press down to the floor, and lift the chest into cobra. Pelvis nice and strong, but lift it through the chest. And from there, press back to hands and knees, tuck the toes, and back into downward facing dog. Take 3 breaths here. And again, just check the strength of your foundation as well as the width of your feet. You want your feet to be roughly hips distance apart so you can use your feet independently. And on your next breath, you can step forward, bring your gaze forward, all the way up to the front of the mat. Fold in as you exhale. With the legs strong, place your hands to your hips and come all the way up to standing again. And then bring the hands alongside for Tadasana. And number 2, inhale, reach the arms up again, keep the legs firm. Exhale, fold and touch the ground. On the next inhale, gaze forward. Place your palms and step back again to your upside down V, downward facing dog. This time with the hands and feet firm, see if you can firm up the lower body and press the top of the thigh bones back to help elongate your spine. The shoulders stay firm, but the thigh bones move back towards the back of the legs. And on your next breath, come all the way to the top of your push-up, inhaling. And this time you can lower down by bending the elbows, come all the way down to the floor. And just keep your palms under your elbows, bring your toenails to the floor, and curl into cobra pose. Pelvis heavy, but upper body strong. And from there, you can press back again through hands and knees or straight back to downward facing dog for another 3 breaths. Here you can recheck the foundation through the big toe, mound, the inner heel, the little toe, and the outer heel, so that the lower body and the legs are firm as you stretch. And on your next breath, step forward, come all the way up to the front of the mat again. And fold in as you exhale. And just take an extra breath here to firm the legs up. Place the hands on the hips. And again, inhale, come all the way up to standing. Bring the hands to the sides for Tadasana. And third sun salutation. Inhale, reach the arms, keep the lower legs firm. Exhale, fold, and touch the ground. On your inhale, gaze forward. Place the palms and step back as you exhale to downward facing dog. And use this breath here just to recalibrate the foundation and encourage a nice deep breath. We'll do upward facing dog for this one. On your next inhale, come to high plank, top of your push-up, and then come forward a little bit and all the way down to the floor. Once you're down, you can lay the toenails down, and this time come all the way up with the pelvis off the floor into a back bend, upward facing dog. Curl the shoulders back, bring the gaze forward, and then from there, press back again, straight back into downward facing dog. Take 3 nice deep breaths here. With the periphery of the body firm, it's much easier to stretch the core lines of the body. 1 more breath. And on your next inhale, step, or if you like, you can jump forward between the hands, all the way up to the top. Exhale and fold in. And as you inhale, reach all the way up, stretch the arms overhead this time. And as you exhale, bring the hands to the sides. All right, having completed the 3 sun salutations, we're now going to move into the standing postures. So you can take a big step out to the side of the mat, face out that way. Turn the feet so they're parallel with one another, and then bring your arms up to a T. And we'll just use this shape to develop the width of stance that we need for the standing poses. So take a look down, make sure that your feet are roughly underneath your wrists. For most people, that would indicate the right length of stance for them. And before we get into the pose, just bring your hands to your hips and bend your knees. And then from there, slide your hands down so that you can bring your hands to the top of the knees. So here we've created a slight back bend and strong legs. elongate, lift the chest, keep the legs nice and firm, and then lean forward, bring the fingertips to the floor, a little ways forward of your feet. You can bring the hands forward, bring them down. Good. And then before you go any deeper in the pose, just shift forward so that your hips are right over top of your ankles, so your hips aren't too far behind your feet. There you go. And you can walk the feet, or the hands rather, a little bit further forward so you have a long spine. So this will be our starting position for forward fold. From there, with strong feet, you can just walk the fingers back, bend the elbows, and go deeper into the pose from there, bringing the head closer to the floor. So as the lower body stays firm and the upper body moves, we're creating a stimulus to the legs, a stretch. Take a couple of long breaths here. One more breath. Again, steady with the legs, long with the breath. And then walk your fingers a little bit forward, come back up again a little bit out of the pose. And with strong legs from here, walk your fingers over to your left so that you're stretching through the right side of the body. And here you'll notice that your right foot may want to come unplugged as you lean over to your left. So really make that outer right foot strong. This is a preparation for the standing poses to come. From there, walk your fingers back through the middle. And just take a breath in the middle with strong legs, elongating your spine. And from there, walk your fingers over to your right, keeping your left foot very firm. You may notice the tendency of the left foot, especially the outside edge of the foot, to become unplugged. So plug it back down to stretch and strengthen the hips. One more breath there. And then all the way back again to the middle, and we'll do one more forward fold. Strengthen the legs, walk your fingers back, and fold more deeply into the pose. A couple of nice long breaths. To come out of the pose, bend your knees slightly, bring your gaze forward, bring your hands to the top of the knees, and then stretch the legs straight, hands to hips, and the next pose will be Warrior Two. All right, take a wide stance again in preparation for Warrior Two. Before we get there, we'll do a little bit of work with the hips and the legs. So again, bend your knees slightly, bring your hands to the top of the knees. And here your knees are a little bit forward of the feet, but your legs are nice and strong. See if you can keep that natural curve in your spine. Bring your arms to a T, and then slowly stand up straight. And as you stand up straight, try to not allow the pelvis to move forward and to flatten the low back. So really stretch the legs as straight as you can, lift your spine. And now just turn your right foot out to the short end of the mat. Keep the back leg firm, and then bend the forward knee till it comes right over top of your ankle. And eventually you can bring the gaze over the forward fingers for Warrior Two. And here again, the back foot will want to come unplugged because you're moving the body forward. So keep it strong. Point the front knee straight over the second toe. Take one more deep breath. And then from there, straighten your forward leg, parallel both feet. Turn the left foot out to the short end of your mat. And again, just take a moment here to re-fortify the foundation of the feet, and then bend the forward knee and come into Warrior Two on the second side. And take a few deep breaths here. Back foot nice and strong, gaze over the forward fingers, stretching down through the lower body and lifting up through the upper body. One more breath. And then straighten the forward leg again, parallel both feet, and bring the hands to the hips. Side angle pose. Make the feet nice and strong. You bring your arms to a T again. And from there, turn your right foot out again to the short end of the mat, nice and strong. And then bend your forward knee. Bring your forward hand down to the blocks just outside of your forward foot. Bring your back hand to your hip for a moment. And take a moment there and stretch the back leg straight. Draw your ribs in to elongate your spine. And now sweep the top arm up and over your ear with the palm facing down. And from there, with the throat strong, you could turn the gaze up a little bit towards the bicep. Take 2 more breaths here, inside angle pose. And on the next breath, come all the way back up to standing and parallel your feet. Okay, Arms to a T again, stretch them nice and strong. Turn the left foot out to the short end of the mat. Keep the back leg firm. Bend the forward knee, come all the way down, bringing your forward hand to the blocks, the firm palm. Bring your back hand to your hip. And with the back leg straight and strong, draw your low ribs in so the torso is strong, and even rotate a little bit with the torso into the pose to deepen it. Stretch the top arm up and over your ear, palm facing down, and take a couple of long breaths here. Good. Keep the feet firm, and as you inhale, come all the way back up to the top of the pose. Parallel your feet, straighten your forward leg. All right, bring your hands to your hips, heel and toe your feet a little closer together, and turn and step to the front of your mat. Make the feet strong, elongate through the upper body, draw your shoulders back, and just take a moment and just really inhabit this pose, Tadasana, make it firm. Next pose is balancing. Balancing on your left foot, bend the left knee a little bit so it's strong, left leg is strong, bring your right knee up, and you can just bring your hands around the top of the knee, and now stretch the standing leg straight. From there, you can bring your right arm inside the right knee to hold the outside edge of your right foot, and squeeze both legs towards the midline of the body. Next stage is to bring your foot forward, pull back on the foot, stretch down through the standing leg, and lift the chest. Take one more breath. And then release. Hands to hips, bring your foot back to the floor. And side two. Bring the weight into the opposite foot. Bring the other knee up. You can bend the standing leg a little bit for strength. Then cap the knee with your hands and stretch through the bottom leg first. So we want to get the bottom leg straight and keep it straight. Then take the arm inside the knee to hold the outside edge of the foot, and now squeeze in with both lower legs to make the pose strong. You can point the sole of the foot forward, pull back on the foot like a bowstring, stretch down through the bottom leg. And one more deep breath, and then release the leg and foot all the way back to Tadasana. Root down through the legs. And as you inhale, reach up, gaze up. Exhale, fold forward, touch the floor. Inhale, gaze ahead, and step your left leg back into a long runner's lunge with your front knee over your ankle and the back heel over your toes. Fingertips give you maximum height here. And then bring the gaze forward, stretch the spine. And as you bring your gaze forward, the back leg tends to get weak and drop. So stretch it straight, make it strong. And just as you did in the last pose, squeeze your lower legs in towards the midline for strength. On your next inhale, step forward, gaze forward. And as you exhale, fold in. Take one moment here, stretch the legs. On the next inhale, bring your gaze forward and step your opposite leg back into the same long runner's lunge. Front knee over ankle, back heel over toes. Squeeze in with the lower legs, make a strong foundation, and then stretch through the spine, bring your gaze forward. On your next breath, step forward with the back leg. Exhale as you fold in to a standing forward fold. Hands to hips, and inhale, come all the way back up to standing to bring the hands to the sides. And continuing, stretch the strong legs straight. Inhale, reach your arms up. Exhale, fold again and touch the ground. Inhale, gaze forward. And step your left leg back again to that same long runner's lunge. Once you've found the width and the length of the pose, your width should be about hips distance apart, length as before. Now turn your back foot about 45 degrees out and plug it in nice and strong to the floor. You want to have a heel-to-heel alignment here for balance. Then walk your fingers over to the left or to the inside of the pose. And the trick here is to keep the back leg firm while you point your front knee straight ahead. And that's going to be preparation for Warrior 1, which is coming up. Take a couple of long breaths here. establishing the foundation of the pose. And then walk the fingers around to frame the forward foot again. Turn the back heel up and step forward on your inhale and fold in as you exhale. Side 2, gaze forward, inhale, step your right leg back for a long runner's lunge. Once you've set the length and the width of the pose, then turn the back foot out 45 degrees. Make all 4 corners strong. And then walk your fingers over to the inside of the pose. Keep stretching and strengthening the back leg while you point your front knee straight over your second toe. And one more nice deep breath. And then again, frame the forward foot with your fingertips. Turn your back heel up and step forward on an inhale and fold in as you exhale. Hands to hips, and inhale, come all the way back up to standing. Draw your shoulders back and bring your hands to your sides. All right, Warrior 1. Inhale, reach the arms up, gaze up. And as you exhale, fold in. Inhale to gaze forward. Step the left leg back again into a long runner's lunge, building the pose step by step. Then turn the back foot out 45 degrees, make it strong and straight. And this time bring your hands to your hips and come all the way up to standing and straighten your forward leg. So we want to come all the way up to a preparation for Warrior 1 before we actually do the pose. Reach both arms overhead. Keep the foundation of the pose strong. Lift your chest. And with the back leg straight and strong, bend your forward knee. Bring the knee straight over the second toe. You can bring your gaze up to the sky for 3 long breaths in Warrior 1. The whole lower body provides the strength and stability to stretch the spine and open the upper body. And with the legs firm, you can exhale, bring your fingertips back to the floor. Turn the back heel up. Step forward on your next inhale. And as you exhale, fold in. Take an extra breath here. Regain some energy. And on your inhale, come all the way back up to standing. Reach your arms up. And we'll go right back down from here. Exhale and fold in for side 2 of the pose. Inhale, gaze ahead. Step your opposite leg back, right leg back. Establish the length and the width of your pose. And then turn the back foot out 45 degrees. Make it nice and firm. Bring your hands to your hips. Come all the way up to standing, straightening your forward leg and using the strength of that forward leg to press back into your back leg. Now see if you can rotate your pelvis by using the rotation of the back thigh to help drive the pelvis square forward. Inhale, reach the arms up. Keep your legs firm. And then bend your forward knee and come into your version of Warrior 1. 3 nice deep breaths. Challenging the strength in the lower body and opening the upper body. And on your next exhale, bring your fingertips and then full palms down to the floor. Turn your back heel up, and this time step back into downward facing dog and stretch out. Take a couple of long breaths. All right, in downward facing dog, just take a few moments here. Again, set the foundation through the corners of the hands and the feet. Stretch through your arms and legs. And our next pose will transition towards the floor, Pigeon pose. Draw your right knee forward, take it a little bit wider than your hip, come all the way down to your outer shin. And you can walk your arms forward, interlace your fingers, bring your elbows to the floor so that you can support your upper body. With the toe pads tucked down on your back foot, stretch your back leg as straight as you can. Lift the knee. Make the front foot nice and strong as well, even the outside edge of your front foot. And with those points nice and strong, you can begin to lower your pelvis towards the ground. Now that movement is in opposition to the strength of your back leg, and that's where the stretch is. Take a couple more breaths there. And we can add a back bend to this pose. So now you can deinterlace your fingers, bring your fingertips to the floor. With the back leg still strong, lift the chest, draw your shoulders back. Take a couple of long breaths and create a back bend and a hip opening here. Take one more deep breath. And then walk the hands forward a little bit, place them down to the ground, and press back again to downward facing dog. Take a moment here in between. Feel your breath. And side two, bring your left leg forward, take the knee a little wider than the hip, come down to the outer shin, and then lower down to the forearms as you interlace your fingers for support. With the toe pads tucked on the back foot, strengthen the leg and then lift the knee off the ground. With the back leg firm, the front foot strong, begin to lower the pelvis towards the ground. See if you can maintain that steady strength in the lower body while the breath helps to expand and elongate the spine. Place your fingertips down to the floor for the back bend version. Draw your shoulders back, lift your chest up. Bring the gaze up a little bit. A couple of long breaths here. And then walk the fingertips forward again. Lower the body down a little bit. And this time, just lean over to the left sit bone and swing the back leg around to a sitting position. Bend your knees, wrap your arms around the knees. And just take this moment to help your spine elongate by drawing the knees in with your arms and lifting your chest. Take a few long breaths. And then boat pose or navasana. And we'll do this in stages. So you can bring your hands from the outside of the legs to hold the inner upper thighs. Lengthen your spine. And first, just one leg at a time. Stretch your front leg, your right leg forward. Press through the big toe mount for a version of half navasana. And notice how you're using the strength of your right hand to help widen and open up the thigh so that knee doesn't turn out on you. And then bring that foot back down, and side two. Stretch the left leg out, straight. And if its tendency is to externally rotate, use the left hand to internally rotate the thigh. And then bring the foot back down again. And then full version, you can press the inner toe mounts together so the feet are acting as one unit. Hold on to the inner thighs and stretch the legs forward and straight. And then from there, if you can maintain that internal spiral of the inner thighs, you can release the hands and stretch your arms forward for the full pose. One more deep breath. And then bend your knees. You can have the hands to the top of the knees. And then from there, just lower the body all the way down to the ground and stretch the legs straight out. Once you're there, you can bend the elbows, bring the elbows close to the body with the palms facing in towards one another. Preparation for bridge pose. And before you come up, just take a few breaths here and see if you can begin to establish more curvature in your spine even before you go into the pose by pressing through the back of your head and your shoulders, and that will provide a lift to the chest and a preparation for the back bend. Keeping your elbows and feet firm, on the inhale, bring the pelvis off the ground and into bridge pose. Let's take a couple of deep breaths here. As you lift the pelvis, the tendency will be for the neck to flatten. So draw your chin a little bit away from your chest to keep your gaze straight up. And as you exhale, lower the pelvis all the way down. You can bring your hands to your belly and just take a moment's rest there. In preparation for the same pose again with a little bit more depth. So again, press the elbows down, widen your fingers, press the back of the skull, and then as you inhale, lift the pelvis off the ground and again into bridge pose. And this time as an option, you could interlace your fingers behind your back, underneath you, walk the shoulders in towards the midline, and use the arms as leverage to help lift the chest a little bit more. Keep the chin away from the chest to keep a natural curve in your upper back and neck. One more deep breath here. And then you can release the hands and come all the way down to the ground. So So the next pose is the inversion. It's a modified shoulder stand, and Natalie's got 2 blocks that she's going to be using to place underneath her pelvis to make it easier to do the pose in the middle of the room and avoid some of the problems associated with complex propping for this pose. So we'll start it the same as we did before. Bring the elbows down, nice and strong. Lift the pelvis up and off the ground. And then just take your block set up and slide it under your hips so you're supporting your pelvis with the blocks. This could be 1 or 2 blocks. You want to get them in a position where you feel comfortable and stable. And once you're there, again, you can use the elbows down, palms open as you did before. And then just bring one leg up first just to test your range of motion and strength, and stretch the leg straight up to the sky. If that's working well, you can bring the second leg up and stretch both legs up. So here we're getting the benefits of an inversion without some of the complications and the limitations. Take a few long breaths here. And the inversions, in order for them to work, take a little bit longer, a period of a minute or 2 at least, before the benefits show up. So just keep your breath nice and long and smooth. And you may want to emphasize a little bit on the exhale to start calming the body down as we move towards the end of the practice. See if you can feel the breath expand the ribs, even while you're keeping your feet firm and enough strength through the back of the neck and the shoulders to support the pose. Take 8 more long breaths. Again, as you maintain this position, the lymph from the lower body is draining into the upper body. The heart rate is slowing down a little bit. And the body is moving into a more restorative state. Take 2 more breaths. And then you can bend one knee at a time, come all the way back down with the feet to the ground. And move the blocks out of the way as you're ready, and then lower your pelvis all the way down to the ground again. And from there, you can roll over to one side or cross your legs and roll up to a sitting position. Once you're there, you can stretch the legs straight out. Place your palms or fingertips down at the floor for a modified forward fold. And just lift the chest, keep the legs strong. And from there, take the right knee, bend your right leg, draw the knee in towards your chest. You can wrap the left arm around the outer right knee, bring your right fingertips behind. And then before you go deep into the twist, just lift the chest, firm up the feet and the heel, and then turn the torso into the pose. Lead into the pose with your chest and let the gaze be the last thing that moves, the neck being more mobile than the rest of the spine. 2 more deep breaths. Use the inhale pattern to elongate the spine and the exhale pattern to deepen. And then as you exhale, come all the way back again, forward, and stretch the right leg out. For side 2, bring the left knee up. You may want to hug it in with your arm for a moment to help lengthen your spine. And wrap your right arm around the left knee, left fingertips behind. Make a strong foundation through the legs, lift the chest, and then turn into the pose. Lead with the torso and let the gaze come afterwards. A couple more deep breaths. And as you exhale, turn again to face forward. You can release that knee. And our last pose, last active pose, will be a seated wide leg forward bend. So just bend your knees. You can wrap your arms a little bit around the front of the knees. Again, so you're encouraging length in your spine. Just as we did earlier, take the hands around from the outside to hold the inside of the thighs. Then you can slide the heels forward. But as you go forward and straighten the legs, try to maintain length in your spine. So you're ending up with a pelvis that's neutral and not rolled back. And you can use your fingertips as well to help elongate and encourage length. If that's going well and you can ground your heels, then you can bring your fingertips forward and begin to walk the fingers into a deeper form of the pose. And no matter how deep you go, the legs stay just as firm. And you use the exhale patterns to ground and the inhale patterns to elongate. Take about 5 more breaths here. It's a mindful concentration on the muscular energy in the legs and feeling the breath expand the upper body. Take 1 more breath. And then as you inhale, you can walk your fingers back to lift your chest, bring the legs in a little bit closer, and recline all the way down for relaxation for Shavasana pose. And once you're there, you can just arrange the body so it feels comfortable and symmetrical. If you have any remaining control of the breath, you may want to just exhale out audibly to release that. And take a few moments here to rest. Feel the whole back of the body, the weight of the whole body on the floor. So just take a few moments and associate with that sense of groundedness and relaxation. And as you do that, if there's any remaining tension in the arms or the legs or the jaw, see if you can allow that to melt away. Feeling the weight of the body, you can also notice the lightness of the air on your skin. You can imagine here the body is just absorbing fresh energy. And as you move deeper and deeper into this pose, psychologically, there's less and less control of the outer body and even the breath. See if you can notice the involuntary rise and fall of your breath. And now gradually become aware of the shape of the body via the weight and the temperature on your skin. You can begin to move your fingers and toes a little bit from the periphery back into the core. Take some nice deep inhales and exhales. You may want to draw your knees in, or one knee at a time in towards your chest. Wrap the arms around and maybe rock a little bit side to side before you come up. And then roll your way over onto one side. Just let the head relax, transition there. And then bring a palm down to the ground and press and come all the way back up to a sitting position. And we will end as we began. Take a moment to feel comfortable and balanced through the sit bones. Once you're there, you can bring your palms together, rest your thumbs to your heart. A nice deep inhale and exhale in preparation for one Om. Thanks, Natalie.
The previous sequence covers key postures within the planes of movement possible for us, maintaining and encouraging strength, flexibility, and balance. I encourage you to experiment with other postures within these categories and develop a practice tuned to your needs. Thanks for watching.